Well, Eddie, it's good to meet you today. Just want to have a little chat really to get to know the person who's standing as a Conservative candidate in the probably upcoming general election.
Not far away now.
So can you just give us a little bit of your history?
Indeed. Well, my folks are Irish, came over from Mayo when they were about 16 or 17 and to live in Birmingham. My dad spent most of his life working as a bus driver, my mum was a cleaner. So I grew up in a kind of Irish community in Birmingham and didn't realise in fact that everybody didn't have Irish parents until I went to secondary school. I went to Handsworth Grammar and then from there on to university to do civil engineering, which is one of the strange things I think about my life because I went to an all-boys secondary school. I did a degree that had almost entirely men on it, and then I went to work in construction which had mostly men in it. So when I finally discovered women in the workplace, I realised what a revelation that was, and I've done a lot of work to try to encourage more women into construction subsequently. So I think that gives a bit of a flavour of who I am.
So, where was your interest born in politics?
Well, a kind of embarrassing admission is that the first time I voted, when I was 18, I didn't have any interest in politics. It was a Thursday evening, I was going out to the pub because I'd not long been 18, and my mum said, don't forget to vote. And I said, how should I vote? And because they were Labour voters all their lives, my mum said vote Labour, so I voted Labour the first time I voted. But then when I was at university, as is often the case, I think, you're sat around with your friends, you're watching the TV and the news, and you're talking about how you would do things differently, how you could run the country better if it was up to you. And so my interest in politics was ignited at university. So when I graduated, I went straight back to night school. I did an A-level in politics the first year and economics the second year, just so I could get a bit of grounding. And it was my politics lecturer who said, I don't think you're a Labour supporter, Eddie. I think you should take these manifestos away and come back and tell me what you really are. And it was almost a revelation for me to read the Conservative manifesto and realise just how aligned that was with my view of the world. So it was at university that the kind of flame started and then very quickly grew from there. So once I'd done A-levels in economics and politics, decided I was a Conservative, I joined the party and started campaigning from then on.
I think it's having that interest in economics and what's happening that way does start forming people's viewpoint, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
It's very helpful to understand the kind of how the finances work, how the tax system works, and the kind of impacts that you have. If you change one thing, what impact that has elsewhere in the system.
So, what was the first step you made in your political career?
Well, joining the Conservative Party was a big step because I was in my 20s and you don't have...
What year are we looking at generally, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm trying to do the maths. I think maybe 1996, something like that. 1996, I think. So I joined the Conservative Party, and as a young member, we don't have enough of them. And so people were enthusiastic to have somebody young on board, and I was keen to get out and campaign, knock doors, deliver leaflets, that sort of thing. And it seemed like quite a quick hop, skip and a jump between joining the party and then being a candidate for an award that we were unlikely to win. But at least it gave me the opportunity to see how a campaign works and to have my face on a leaflet and that sort of thing. And so I didn't win the first time, but then I found another seat to stand and became a councillor the following year, and it kind of just escalated from there.
And is that in Walsall?
And that's in Walsall.
And what sort of roles did you get involved in?
Well, numerous, and I say because I'm kind of naturally enthusiastic about anything I do. So once I was on the council, I got on very well with Mike Bird, who was the leader of the council. He's been the leader of the council on and off for the kind of 25 years I'd been involved in politics. So Mike was keen to kind of mentor me and help with my commitment and interest. And so Mike did things like making me chair of a scrutiny committee. I spent an awful lot of my time while I was a councillor working with looked after children. My own children are grown up now, they're 27 and 32, but they still often recall going to discos and events like that with looked after children, and which helped them to appreciate what a difficult life some other people have and kind of appreciate their own life more, and also to see how sometimes the council really got it right and we were able to help young people, despite their perhaps somewhat chaotic backgrounds, kind of find their way in life and then ultimately end up going to university and making a good life for themselves. So I think for lots of reasons it was good for me and it was good for my children as well. But so I had numerous roles, including chairing committees, being on the cabinet and that sort of thing.
So how do you think that's affected your ability to help nationally?
It is incredibly useful as a grounding to have been a councillor, to have done surgeries, to sit in a room on a Saturday morning and have people come in and share their problems, and for you to try to help them navigate solutions to those problems. That's been, incredibly helpful. But also understanding the finances of the council, the tough choices that often have to be made, because money is finite. The council only has a set budget, and if it does one thing, that is definitely at the opportunity cost of doing another. And so balancing those things between, the difficult choices,
economics.
We all have to, and it comes back to the economics indeed. So all of that was an incredibly useful grounding, and it allows you that crossover as well. As a councillor, you get the opportunity to speak to national politicians as well, and then you become better informed, and that helps develop your understanding and, in my case, your enthusiasm.
So we've established that it was Walsall North is your constituency now. I think a lot of people that are looking at this, hopefully, this little chat we're having now, wonder, well, why Tamworth?
Well, that's a very good point. So the Boundary Commission have redrawn the boundaries of constituencies to balance the number of voters. At the moment, we've got some real big constituencies and some real small ones, and they range roughly, I think, in size of voters from about 55,000 to about 120,000. So we need to redraw the boundaries to make sure they've got more equitable distribution of voters, roughly the same number of voters in each one. As a consequence of that, in Walsall, we're going down from having 3 MPs to 2. My constituency is being carved up, and bits of it are being added to 2 Wolverhampton seats to give them more voters, and the remainder has been bolted on to what's left of another Walsall seat. So my constituency is going, and if I was looking for somewhere else to continue to serve, then Tamworth was the obvious choice. And I say that because my wife has worked in Tamworth for 20 years. She lived in Tamworth when I proposed to her and persuaded her to come and live with me in Streatley. And I often say this, and it amuses me now. It was less amusing at the time. She had a bit less faith in our relationship in the early year or two, so she wanted to keep her house. I sold my house so we could buy a place together. She wanted to keep her house in Stony Delph, and 15 years later we've still got that house and we rent it out.
So that's your link.
So that's our link. She's worked in Tamworth for 20 years. My brother lives in the constituency. We've got other friends and family. It feels like home. And in fact, the house where I live in Streatley is just over a mile from the constituency border. So I'm really close to it as well, and spent a lot of time in Tamworth going to the Snow Dome and to the cinema and that sort of thing.
So you actually know quite a lot about all the little interesting parts of town, and presumably some of the history that.
Properly, one of our most romantic first dates was going to see one of the Terminator films at the cinema in Tamworth. Perhaps not exactly as romantic as you might expect.
No, not quite.
But our very first date, the first time we met, was at the Whittington Arms. And so we go back to the Whittington Arms with a real feeling of nostalgia and warmth, and it's a great pub, and they do lovely food as well. So there's little bits of the constituency that mean a lot to us, because that's where are we allowed to use the word courting? Does that still, is that
I
still
think
a word
it's,
these
I think
days?
it's still,
Right, that might be a bit grand.
yeah, probably,
but during our courting years, that's where we were doing it.
So we've not long, it seems, had a by-election in Tamworth. And I'm sure there are quite a few people thinking, well, why on earth were you not the candidate?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I guess the difficulty there is, had I resigned my Walsall seat in order to be the candidate in Tamworth, we'd have therefore had 2 by-elections. Now, by-election is no cheap thing. It costs a few £100,000 to organise one with regard to what each party will spend, what it costs for the council to organise it, and so there's a lot of expense involved. But also, I guess fundamentally, I had been elected by the people of Walsall North to be their MP for the period of the Parliament, and it was probably the right thing for me to stay representing them, even if I was going to miss the opportunity of being the candidate and hopefully subsequently the MP for Tamworth.
Think timing perhaps wasn't as kind as it could have been, because you did actually announce that you were going to be in the forthcoming, and you said general election at the time. You announced that you were going to be our prospective candidate. Yeah. How do you actually feel personally about that time? It must have been very difficult for you as well as everyone else.
Well, what was interesting was I was out campaigning, long days, in fact I think I had one day off, but every single day of the campaign, because even though that would have meant that I'd missed the opportunity to represent Tamworth in Parliament, I felt it was important that we threw everything we could at it to try and win that seat for the Conservative Party. So I worked harder than anybody else to try and make sure that that happened, even though I had said publicly, if Andy was elected, then I would have had to find somewhere else. I certainly wouldn't have expected him to make way for me at the general election. So I was committed to campaigning, whilst appreciating I might have been doing myself out of a possible job in the future, but it was completely the right thing to do.
And also, I think a burning question for quite a few people has got to be, whilst you're doing your campaigning within Tamworth, what on earth's happening to Walsall North?
Again, it's a very good point. And I would say, and I think most people who meet me will see, not only am I generally enthusiastic about my job, but very energetic. I'm in the process of training to run the London Marathon at the moment on behalf of St Giles in Whittington. So I have almost unlimited energy, and I'm very happy to work 7 days a week. So lots of the stuff that I do in the Tamworth constituency and the associated villages is at the weekends or in evenings. So just last night I was attending the parish council meeting in one of the villages in my own time in the evening, doing something like that. Whereas this morning, before we had this interview, I was visiting a new build housing estate in my Walsall North constituency. So it is possible to fit the two things together, providing you're prepared to work long hours, 7 days a week, which I truly am, because I'm absolutely determined to make sure the people of Walsall North don't feel they're getting second-rate service. They've had excellent service from me for 6 years, and I want to continue that. But by the same token, I want to meet as many people as I can across Tamworth and get as involved as I can with the community, and that just requires time and commitment.
I think this is why we wanted to chat today, so that we can iron out all the questions and just let people get to know you as a person.
It's very helpful, and I say people will have those questions, and that people will be making up their own answers or hearing from somebody in the pub what the answer to these questions are. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to share, and if people don't accept or don't believe the answers that I'm giving, well, that's their choice. I'm going to be trying to work hard over the next 9 months or so to convince them of my commitment and dedication.
So we've discussed Tamworth and your time in Tamworth, the time that you spend in Walsall, but obviously you are an MP. What about the time that you spend in Westminster? What's your role there?
Well, there are two roles at the moment. So first of all, I'm obviously in my role as the MP for Walsall North, scrutinising legislation, talking to ministers on behalf of my constituents who have raised issues with me, and it is a unique opportunity to be able to catch a minister in the corridor and make a case on behalf of something that's been raised with me in the constituency. But one of the lesser known jobs that I've got is I'm vice chair of the 1922 committee. So Sir Graham Brady, who chairs the 1922 committee, has become a little more famous than I would like him to be, because we've changed Prime Minister a bit more frequently than we should. But my own induction to that job was incredibly fast. So I got elected as vice chair of the 1922 committee on a Tuesday evening. On a Wednesday evening, the government ran into some severe problems with Liz Truss's government. She resigned on the Thursday morning, and on that Thursday evening I was sat with Sir Graham working out what the rules would be for us to elect a new leader of our party, who would obviously be the next Prime Minister. So 72 hours into my being appointed as the vice chair of that committee, we were straight into action, choosing our next Prime Minister.
Fascinating.
Well, fascinating and daunting. I say we should be changing Prime Ministers perhaps
so
frequently.
So if I was to ask you, do you think is your most memorable moment to date within your political career? Would that be the one that you took?
No. This would be a real strange moment. So I was the minister responsible for reducing rough sleeping, and we had been working on a refresh of the government's plan to tackle rough sleeping, and we were working on that whilst Boris was going out of being the Prime Minister and somebody else was coming in. So one of the things that you have to do as a minister is not just convince your Secretary of State that the work you've done is valid and worthy, but also you need to convince number 10, you need to convince the Prime Minister's office. So we were hoping to publish this plan at the end of that summer period. So we had to convince the current Prime Minister's office that the plan was sound and robust and would be a good thing to introduce. We had to speak to Rishi Sunak, to his office, we had to speak to Liz Truss's office. So effectively we almost had to get clearance from 3 Prime Ministers in order to get that plan signed off. And during the summer, we managed to convince all 3 people that it was a good plan and that it would be good for the country, and got that plan launched, I think, 2 days before Liz became Prime Minister. So that would have been a complex and difficult task, even with just one Prime Minister and having to convince number 10. But immediately before I became an MP, I worked for YMCA Birmingham, a charity helping young people at risk of homelessness. So 3 years experience on the ground myself. And here I was as a government minister with the opportunity to implement changes in the system that would help fewer people end up sleeping rough on the streets. And it was all in jeopardy because the government was in a state of flux.
Absolute chaos, I think.
To pull that off felt like the greatest achievement of my political life, and I was really grateful for it. And went to an event recently in Parliament. YMCA England and Wales were launching their manifesto, and there was a lot of people there from the homelessness and rough sleeping sector, and they were saying nice things about me because they were pleased that we managed to get that plan launched. So that's probably the thing I'm most excited and most proud of.
Which is, I think, a very worthwhile thing. I spent some time just working alongside some of the people without accommodation in Tamworth just before lockdown, and it really touched my soul. That's as much as I could say. So working alongside, making sure that rough sleepers have some rights, I think is commendable.
My time at YMCA was incredible. So we had a 72-bed hostel where we used to take people straight off the street, frequently people who'd been in the armed forces and were struggling with the return to civilian society, people who'd been in prison, people who were care experienced, and we had the opportunity to bring them in, provide them with support, opportunities for education and training, and to see them develop as people when we'd seen them at their lowest ebb was, I mean, it's a real job satisfaction moment. And so when I got the job of minister in the department with that responsibility, it felt like it was made for me. It was really the only job I wanted in government, and it was such a privilege to have it and to be able to really do something with it, and for the people that I spoke to know that this was an area I genuinely cared about. It wasn't just a ministerial appointment I'd been given, and so I was keen to do the best with it. I really cared, and we did make some really significant improvements, I think.
So looking to the future,
well,
what are your plans?
Well, and this is one of the good things I think about where I am now. So I've served as a government whip, I've served as a minister in the government, and so my ambition in terms of any career climbing I might want to do in Parliament has gone. I've addressed that now because I've had those opportunities. If I were to be elected as the MP for Tamworth, then it would be total commitment to being an MP. I'm not keen on the idea of needing to do anything else to have any other form of promotion or anything like that. I would just dedicate my time fully to being an excellent constituency MP.
But if we have a new Prime Minister and they came along and said, Eddie, we'd like you to take a post, please come and join our cabinet.
Well, no, the answer is no, and I can say that because I've had that opportunity. I've been offered a post in government since I stepped down from my previous ministerial role, and I said no. So it's not just that I can say I won't do it in the future. I haven't done it already. I want to commit all of my time when I'm not in Walsall North to working as hard as I can to get to know the people of Tamworth, their concerns, and be their champion.
Now we've got, well, we're not quite sure, are we, how long we've got before we are back in those polling booths. What would you like to say to the people of Tamworth? And I know you've used the term Tamworth and the villages. A little bit, why does that come about? And what would you say directly to them why we should have Eddie as our next MP?
Well, so there are two things. I think first of all, this is they've got almost a try before you buy option here. They can look at what I've done over the previous 6 years and say, is that the sort of representative we would like to have? So I'll give you one good example. Very soon after becoming the MP for Walsall North, I started championing the idea and working really hard to get funding for a new urgent care centre at Manor Hospital. So I secured that money. Matt Hancock, who was the Health Secretary at the time, kind of confirmed that in Parliament. Theresa May confirmed this, I think, in Parliament as well. So I secured the funding for the A&E department, the urgent care centre, and it has opened. So not only in the space of 6 years, I secured the money, and the hospital has been built and is opening and functioning, and it's an incredible service, and the staff there do amazing work. So you can see the dedication that I've got and that I deliver. There are other examples of that with regard to me bringing in funding for a new train station and regeneration of 2 of the main towns. But people can see my track record and see how hard working I've been, and they can see whether that's the type of MP that they want. Now, with regard to my use of the word phrase Tamworth and the villages, because I think when people think of Tamworth as a constituency, they think mainly about the town, but actually there are a lot of significant rural parts to it, to say the least. So Shenstone, Stonall, Clifton Campville, and our brand new addition, Whittington. So Whittington, lovely village, previously part of Lichfield constituency, being added on to Tamworth constituency for the next general election. All of these places have different challenges, and I think it's important for me to be out and about, understanding them and making sure they appreciate they're never forgotten in terms of my efforts.
Thank you for your time. I do hope that people are watching and I've actually got to know a little bit about you.
Marvellous.
I certainly have.
Well,
Thank
that's
you.
great. Thank you for this
Thank you.
opportunity.